blood vessel had burst in my brain in the primary motor cortex, so it had just shut down the left side of my body. You literally go from being like fit, healthy, etc. to pretty fucked. My really close friends would say, I'm not sure if you're all right. You know, you can go out into the street these days and say to almost anyone, do you think mental health's important? And they'll say yes. How do you look after it? Don't know. That's what needs to change.
So, the poll. Tell me, how did the idea even spark?
I can't do like extreme altitude, so doing stuff like Everest was kind of out of the question for me. We went through these mental exercises for a long time and just got to the point where it was like, I don't see any reason why this isn't possible. I got really obsessed by it. Basically all I did for 6 years was work towards this thing. Unlike any other project I've ever done before, you know, whilst I don't intend to do myself any long-term harm doing this, I'm not coming off the ice unless I physically cannot move.
Today's guest is someone whose story completely redefines resilience, limits, and what the human body and mind are capable of. Jonny Huntington is a former Army officer, endurance athlete, explorer, and speaker. But just weeks after achieving his dream of commissioning from Sandhurst, Jonny suffered a life-changing stroke that left him paralysed down one side of his body. What followed wasn't just recovery, it was reinvention. Jonny went on to become the first person with a disability to ski solo and unsupported to the South Pole, spending weeks alone in Antarctica, pulling his own sled across the ice. This conversation isn't just about extraordinary physical challenges, it's about identity, mindset, pain, purpose, and what happens when the life you planned disappears and you have to build something entirely new. Jonny, I'm so grateful to have you here. Welcome to my podcast.
Thanks, Trace. It's really kind of you to have me. Yeah, it's nice to do one in person for a change.
Oh, good. Have you done them sort of remotely before?
Yeah, literally all have been done sort of via video call before. Yeah. So yeah, it's nice to be actually sat in front of someone having a proper chat.
Oh, well, I appreciate you coming down. So let's start with, who was Jonny before the change?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like, it's a weird one because I think that a lot of people who encounter those who have had we call them life-changing injuries.
Yeah.
And I think there's an automatic assumption that if you've had a life-changing injury, then that you as a person have changed.
Yeah.
And actually I sort of haven't at all. I'm still basically equally like as bad at life as I used to be. And I sort of still, try not to take anything too seriously and all of these things. So I think one of the things for me, which is quite almost reassuring about it, is that I don't think in terms of the values I have, the stuff that I really care about and all of this, I sort of don't think that intrinsically as a person I've changed very much. Mm-hmm. Which, as I say, I sort of find it quite reassuring because it means that I was probably pointed in like loosely the rough direction, or the right direction, sort of the first time round.
Yeah.
But I think a big part of that was also because at the point at which I did get injured, so I was 28 when I got injured, mm-hmm. and I was still very much like finding my way in life at that point.
Yeah, it's young.
And I didn't feel, certainly not until I joined the military, mm-hmm. which again, I did quite late, like I was 27 when I joined the army.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like settled.
Yeah.
So,
sorry. No, I was going to say, can I ask why the army?
Yeah, so I basically, because I was over age when I joined.
Okay.
So I'd looked at joining the Marines, which obviously, because of your brother, you know about. And there was a fantastic documentary, I think it was made in like the mid-80s, called Behind the Lines, which ironically, all the stuff they get up to in that, I sort of do now for work, really. It was back in the day called the Mountain Arctic Leaders Cadre.
Okay.
And it's basically this bunch of elite Marines who spend all their time like climbing and skiing and doing stuff in the wet and the cold.
Yeah.
And I watched that, and a friend of mine from uni was an officer in the Marines. Mm. And so I spent a lot of time chatting to him, and, particularly back when we were sort of 26, 27, my mate there was a character to him that I really admired.
Yeah.
He was like, he'd already done 2 tours of Afghan by that point, and was just like he came across as like totally unflappable, like very, very calm the entire time. And sort of almost giving the impression that he didn't care.
Yeah.
But because I was his mate, I knew that actually he really cared.
Yeah.
And I always admire sort of that characteristic in people, those who come across as utterly unflappable, but that deep down they really, really care.
Yeah.
And so I'd sort of, this sort of combination of things that I sort of liked the look of the job and liked what I perceived to be the end product of it as a person. So I sort of looked at joining the Marines. That didn't happen because I was overage. They'd lowered all the recruiting ages at that point because it's sort of a combination of like the Afghan conflict was drawing down to an extent in sort of 2013, 14. It was still fairly spicy, but it wasn't what it was like in like 9, 10, 11.
Yeah.
And also because of the recession, like recruiting numbers for the military, particularly officers, had gone up. Because you had loads of people coming out of the city, etc. Like basically the same thing that I did, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And so like recruiting numbers were up, but the requirement for us was less. So they'd lowered the recruiting ages. So I was given not even an interview for the Marines, fair enough. They just said, sorry, you're too old.
Yeah.
So
at 28.
Yeah. So went and joined the army, and they had said, we'll take you, but you've got to do one of these jobs.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a job particularly that I wanted to do. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It just, for me at that point in time, wasn't what I saw myself doing.
Yeah.
But because I wanted to, ultimately my plan was to do selection into one of the Special Forces regiments, so the Reconnaissance Regiment. And you can do that from anywhere. So I basically thought, right, I'll get in, and then I can just do this, and that'll be fine. So that was kind of the plan.
Yeah. So you become an officer. How does that feel?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Like I had a great time at Sandhurst, actually. Like not everyone that goes through the factory enjoys it. And kind of fair enough. I had a great time. It was basically university with guns. So it was awesome. Sort of, like my colour sergeant, who is kind of, you have two directing staff that look after your 30 blokes, so your platoon. And so you have like a platoon commander and a colour sergeant. And the platoon commander sort of runs you operationally. Yeah. But then the colour sergeant sort of looks after you at a bit of a more granular level. He's the one that has like the oversight over you as individuals. Yeah. He sort of came up to me. It was like during the first exercise we did, so like 4 or 5 weeks in, and we were just lying in a field and it was raining. We were just like literally having to lie there while someone was like wrecking a like harbour area or something like that. And the last proper job that I'd been in Singapore. So he sort of, this Mancunian Fusilier come up to me and was like, hey, Mr. Huntington, bet you wish you were back in Singapore now, don't you? It's like, no, this is brilliant. It's like, so, no, I absolutely loved it. I had a great time. Yeah.
It didn't last long, sadly. How long was it before you had your stroke?
Yeah, so I commissioned April of 2014, and then so 8 weeks later in June. So yeah, I was been on leave for 3 weeks after commissioning, and then you go straight into your phase 2 training, which is basically you go to Sandhurst to train in effectively in leadership. So you sort of do your decivilianisation, learn how to become a soldier, because the job of everyone in the army is like soldier first. So you have to be able to do all of that. And then you sort of do your I suppose your job role training, which is leadership in kind of, the purest sense. And then you go on to do the training that prepares you for the actual like role that you undertake. So I joined the Education and Training Services, so I was training to become an army teacher at that point.
Okay.
And so I was literally 5 weeks into that. So I was sat, not doing anything interesting. I was like in a gym in Winchester, like just doing phys one morning, and went from over the course of like 15 minutes, basically went from standing to sitting to lying on my back. And during that period, sort of, I just started to feel a bit weird.
How weird? Explain that.
So I was like, I think I'd literally like stretched my arms above my head or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's not, like, it's not going up, like I can't move it all the way. So, and because I obviously sort of had no reference point for any of this, it basically what we sort of later found out was effectively like, because a blood vessel had burst in my brain in the primary motor cortex on my right hand side, so it had just shut down like completely, like the left side of my body. It's called
over a 15-minute period.
Yeah, so it's called a cavernous malformation. So it's quite a slow bleed, which was lucky for me, because if it had been about 1.5 inches bigger, it would hit my brainstem, and that's that's not good news. But like, yeah, it was sort of, you literally go from being like fit, healthy, etc., to pretty fucked.
Yeah. What do you think's happening in that moment, in those 15 minutes? Because you're obviously not thinking it's a stroke. You wouldn't have been.
No, I didn't
at that
all.
age.
And like, so I was really lucky that the officer who was in charge of me knew like the FAST acronym.
Yeah.
So he looked at me and was like, "This guy's having a brain like issue of some sort."
Okay.
Because he had seen that half of me was not working.
Okay.
I didn't have a clue. So what we later found out was that because the blood vessel that eventually burst had been like expanding, so basically it prohibited the blood from flowing like properly through the vessel.
Yeah.
So that had been expanding for a couple of weeks beforehand and pressing on bits of my motor cortex. So bits of my left side were not working properly in the build-up, but just so discreetly that I didn't notice.
Oh, I see.
So I'd been developing a bit of sciatica on my right side, just because my right side was doing
the work of the left.
Yeah, it was like compensating for it without me realising it.
Yeah.
So I'd been into hospital the day before, and they wanted to do an MRI scan on my back, because you basically see like military, and you think like back problems because of load carriage and stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I sort of had basically not, and it all happened quite quickly, like in the grand scheme of things. So I sort of hadn't really had time to give it much thought in terms of, I've got no idea what's happening to me, and this is kind of is what it is. And now I'm lying on the floor, but like, do you know? But exactly like you've said, 28 years old, like you don't know.
So when do you realise how serious it is?
So when they took me into hospital, because I'd lost a tiny bit of sensation in my face, so I never got like facial droop or anything like that. Like the muscular impairment sort of ended about there.
Okay.
But I lost a bit of sensation, so I could literally like draw a line down the middle of my face, and that felt slightly different.
Okay.
So as soon as it went above the neck, they were like, MRI brain. Like they knew immediately it was a brain injury.
Yeah.
So had an MRI, and basically at that point they found that there was about a Satsuma's sized like puddle of blood in my head, basically.
Jeez.
And that was the problem with that, was that they then, I had a junior doctor come in and be like, yeah, you've got a brain tumor, and then like he just went. So I was just like, right. And I sort of said to like one of the officers from my training unit was in the the little sort of cubicle with me, and I was like, Matt, you might give me a couple of minutes. Like, I think just need to. And like, I remember sort of sitting there thinking, pretty sure I ought to be crying now, but I'm not. And you sort of, I think, again, with I don't think I'd even like, the only person that I knew who'd ever encountered like anything bad really was like one of my uncles had a brain tumor and had had it removed, and was living not a completely consequence free, but a very like
normal life,
a relatively normal life.
Yeah.
So other than that, I had like no reference point even for it. So I phoned my aunt, who's also my godmother. Like Sally and I are very close.
Yeah.
and sort of she was the first person I told that I'd just been like told this thing. So fast forward to like that evening, this was all sort of around lunchtime. Fast forward to that evening, one of the consultants came in and was like, right, that, you know, that doctor's been fired and he shouldn't have said that. And
Yeah.
but you know, he said like, yeah, we don't know that you've got a brain tumor. That's one of the spectrum of options, but actually because you've got a load of blood sat where we need to see, we can't tell you definitively what's happened to you. And you know,
Yeah.
so I found out 9 months later actually what the
Oh, okay.
what the thing was.
So what, did it sit there for 9 months?
Yeah, so basically because there was no need
Goodness.
to, so there was no urgent need to like relieve the pressure because it was quite a slow
Okay.
bleed. So they didn't drill like, you know, the sort of the nuclear option is to like just drill a borehole into your head and let the blood drain out.
Yeah.
With me, they put me on like an industrial quantity of steroids
Oh.
to help ease the inflammation.
Yeah.
But they just said, oh, the blood will just reabsorb naturally, so we'll leave it rather than drilling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so about 9 months later, I was going in for MRIs every 3 months. And yeah, about 9 months later, they said, yeah, we can see now with enough resolution to know like what this was caused by.
Yeah. Within those 9 months, physically, you aren't able to walk. You are completely changed. Talk to me about that. What are you doing in that initial period?
I was really lucky that because I was in the military and sort of the military are a pleasantly non-judgmental organisation when it comes to who goes to rehab.
Okay.
So I spent five weeks in hospital. So initially like being monitored, making sure that you know, I didn't have another bleed. It's sort of you have one, it's not uncommon to have another like comparatively soon afterwards. As soon as they were ready to release me, the military had already, and you know, for all of the fact that I wasn't over the moon about the corps that I joined, you know, simply because of the job role, what I will say is they looked after me as well as anyone could have.
Good.
You know, they had, by the time I was ready to leave hospital, they'd already got me a bed at Headley.
Okay.
So Headley Court, for those not aware, was the military's premier rehab facility during like the Afghan conflict. It's now moved up to Loughborough, up to Stamford. So Headley sort of sadly doesn't exist anymore in its form as when I knew it. But I mean, you know, they'd already had like 5 years worth of people coming back from Afghan at that point. Like the rehab staff there were like amongst the best in the world. It was an incredible facility. And it was quite intimidating.
Really?
Yeah, it's like not when you were there, like at all. Like everyone was amazing. Like it was the most incredible environment to go into, but it was quite intimidating before you got there because I was sat there as someone who had served literally like 8 weeks as a commissioned officer.
Yeah.
You know, I thought I sort of had images in my head of just being surrounded by like blokes that had been blown up and done 20 years of service and just, you know, wondering whether I deserved to be there, basically.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky that the officer in charge of me at the time just turned around and said, look, if you, it's not about time served. Like, if you need to be at Headley, you go to Headley.
Yeah.
You know, so it was an amazing environment, like the level of expertise available to you in order to get you better. But also you know, I was fully salaried the entire time, which I don't think there's another job in the world where they would let you do that. I mean, 2.5 years worth of rehab. The NHS told me, and I, you know, again, with no disrespect to that system at all, because it does its job as best as it can. They had told me that the day that I went to Headley, that if I hadn't been going to Headley, I'd have been sent home that day anyway. Goodness. And like I was still completely paralysed.
Take us back to that day you get to Headley. Physically, what are you like?
So I'm in a wheelchair. I'm basically unable to move at all still down my left side. Like bits and pieces of sort of gross motor movement have come back. So I've got like a bit of activation in like my left thigh. I'm don't think I could move my arm at all.
You couldn't walk?
No, so couldn't walk at all. Like I couldn't support my own body weight on my feet at all. Like the NHS had given me a splint to do some walking with, but I hadn't like put it on. I remember this, like we were to paint a picture of the sort of state I was in. I was on like a palliative dose of dexamethasone to relieve the swelling in my head. So Dexa's like it's actually designed as a cancer drug,
Okay.
but it's an anti-inflammatory
Yeah.
steroid. And the day that I moved from Winchester to Headley, which is sort of Leatherhead, so like Epsom kind of way,
Yeah.
straight down the M3, M25, and you're in. That Monday was the final day, or the day that Glastonbury Festival.
Okay.
So it was my dad and my sister came to pick me up, and so I was still like largely getting around in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I could take like a couple of steps, like mainly just leaning on my right leg and sort of, hobbling along.
Yeah.
We hit the M3, and one of the side effects of dexamethasone is that like it makes you retain water.
Okay.
So like basically at the point at which your body decides, we're retaining enough water, you need to piss, like you've got about 30 seconds.
Oh goodness.
So driving down the M3, and I was like, I need to go for a piss. So you like swing into like Fleet Services, like big service station, and it is
Heaving.
basically chock full of hippies that are all like monged out of their tits. And so I got out of the car, and like my sister's like basically carrying me into Fleet Services. I'm in uniform because I'm about to go to a military facility. So my sister's like, get out of the way. It's like shoved me into it was just absolute chaos. So it's like very very difficult at that point to actually function like normally at all. And I couldn't walk properly. Like I couldn't really, like my left hand, I think I could move my fingers by that point, but not with the same level of dexterity that I obviously can like now. So it's really very difficult to do anything that required like both sides of you, pretty much.
And at this point, had they given you any indication as to whether you would fully recover, partially recover?
So the hardest thing about having a brain injury is that they will not give you any sureties around what your recovery pathway looks like. And it's one of the more difficult aspects to it, like later on. And it's something that I'm always, I get asked every now and again. Social media is an interesting place, and I get asked now and again, particularly now that I've sort of got, not that I've got a public profile by any stretch of the imagination, but people are more aware of what I've done now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will frequently get asked by people on social media, like, oh, I'm 12 months post-stroke. Like, how did you get your arm back? Like, mine's not working anymore. And one has to be really super careful to really re-emphasize the point of everyone with a neurological injury is going to have a different recovery pathway.
Okay.
And it will, like, there are so many variables in terms of like age, neuroplasticity, like goodness knows how you like measure that. But that's kind of I don't want to equate it to like the physical health of your brain, but it's sort of, for want of a better analogy, it kind of is. It's the ease with which your body develops new neural pathways, basically.
Okay.
If there's an actual neurologist like watching, apologies that I've probably mangled that, but I'm not
We
a
get
real,
the gist of
I'm a
what you
sports
said.
scientist, not a real one, so, forgive me. But there are so many factors that affect brain recovery that it's really, well, it's impossible for clinicians to anticipate what a recovery pathway looks like. So you'll be given a trajectory, and the physios will do with you what you can, but there is an element to it of, we need to wait and see what comes back online in what order. We can do things to help stimulate that. So a lot of the stuff you do with like a totally dead limb will be like manipulating it
Mm.
to do the motions that it normally should do,
Yeah.
on the basis that if you're giving your brain like haptic feedback, it will hopefully like pick up on that and like realize that it's meant to be doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's, again, like Headley was an incredible environment because it had loads of facilities. So like as a neuro patient, the hydro pool was a really, really big resource we used because, how do you have, you have to repattern, which is when your brain recognizes what is required of it in order to tell your muscles
What to
how
do?
you walk. In
Oh, I
particular, so
see.
walking in particular is one where it's a very, when you walk, you don't think about
Yeah.
what you're doing. You just
do it.
you just walk,
Yeah.
and it happens. When your brain has shut itself off and then has to like reboot, basically, all of that patterning like doesn't exist. So when I was
Goodness.
relearning how to walk, you have to you have to consciously tell your muscles like what to do.
Yeah.
And with an injured limb, that's really difficult because it's not even strong enough to hold your body weight up. So you end up in this slightly sort of wicked conundrum of like,
Yeah.
we need to get the brain learning how to do this again, but we can't physically do it.
Do it to teach the brain.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure I met Jimmy, your brother,
Yeah.
in the changing rooms of the swimming pool at Headley. So he was doing a lot of swimming for rehab, which I was as well, because
Yeah.
that's a really good way of strengthening a limb that can't bear weight properly.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever did hydro with Jim, but I'm sure that he probably did a load of that as well.
Mhm.
But like I spent a load of time in the hydro pool because you could do the walking like movements without weighing the limb.
Yeah.
So
How scary is that, Jonny? You don't know at this stage how much your body's going to recover. All you can do is keep trying. And for a 28-year-old, just at the beginning of life, really, let's be honest, how scary is that? Can you remember when you look back?
I think the environment at Headley made it a lot easier. Like
Okay.
in the sort of immediacy of the moment, the
Mhm.
environment at Headley made it a lot easier because it is full on.
Mm.
You are 9 to 5, 5.5 days a week, you're rehabbing.
Yeah.
So you don't have time to consider at that point, and like neuro rehab, the other thing it does to you is because you're working your brain as much as you're working your body, you get like neurological fatigue.
Okay.
And that is, for anyone that's ever experienced it, or for anyone that's never experienced that, the best way I can analogize it is like if you've had a really hard day at work
Mm-hmm.
and you've like not done anything physical, you've just sat there for 8 hours having to do stuff and be really present and be really attentive.
Yeah.
At the end of that, sometimes you'll get home and you'll feel like physically exhausted and you just want to like shut off.
Yeah.
So that's like that level of like cognitive fatigue. That's basically your brain just being like, actually, I'm really tired.
Mm-hmm.
And that just manifests in just feeling fatigued.
Yeah.
So that's like neuro fatigue, basically. That's your whole system. So in sport, we refer to it as central nervous system fatigue.
Okay.
So it's like the bit that actually keeps the whole of you operating.
Yeah.
It's just like, right, I'm really tired now. So I'm going to like shut you down so
Yeah.
that you don't knacker me anymore.
Yeah.
We used to be able to like, in someone with a brain injury, you can get them to that point in like 45 minutes of rehab.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you're literally trying to stress like an injured brain already.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
But particularly like repatterning it is really intensive because you're asking a damaged thing to learn from scratch.
Yeah.
So, my first stint at Headley was like 9 months long. And I was basically like just knackered all the time.
All the time.
And they're great when they realise that you're knackered. You go to sleep.
Yeah.
45 minutes in bed, and then you're good to go again. But so I didn't really have like the time or the energy during that initial period to sort of consider what
the
future looked like. And I was constantly being told that like the neuro recovery pathway is 2 years. basically. And I remember having this conversation with Jimmy as well,
Yeah.
because I think he was coming towards the end of, I can't remember exactly when he got injured, but
So he was shot December 2013.
I was going to say I think it was about 2013, because I would have met him
2014.
probably the back end of 2014.
Back end of it, yeah.
So yeah, he would have been told the same thing, because he was looking at regrowing nerves basically.
Yeah, that's it.
Which again, like neurological recovery, same kind of thing basically.
Yeah.
So I think he and I had both sort of had that discussion around, oh, how long have you got until your rehab window wears out, etc. And I think, I can't speak for anyone else, but certainly from my perspective, it was kind of like, right, I'm not even going to worry about what like post 2 years looks like. I'm just going to be very much present and
In the moment.
Yeah, and just like, I don't need to worry about that right now. I just need to focus on getting better to the extent I can at the minute.
Yeah.
And that was great. But what it did mean was that 2 years down the line, and that, from my point of view, that's when like my mental health started deteriorating quite a bit. And because I'd gotten to that point where I had effectively, like, my rehab had plateaued and I was approaching that 2 year period. And I'd also, because I left Headley for the second time in November of 2015. And then I left the military in November 2016. So I still had another 12 months.
Yeah.
Where I was at the personnel recovery unit in Aldershot, which is a much less intensive system than Headley. So, and like, I didn't really get on with my physio there, because she was just frankly not as good of a physio as the one at Headley, which is an impossible bar to set. It's not really fair. But it was kind of my physios and recovery, like the ERIs, so it's like the exercise recovery instructor. So it's basically a physical trainer, but for injured people.
Okay.
Everyone at Headley was very much of the attitude of, try it. Like, if you think that's going to work, give it a go. And we're here to supervise, so you do that.
Yeah.
Everyone at Aldershot was super risk averse.
Okay.
Because, and sort of fair enough, they had like more people to look after. Headley was mostly one-on-one.
Oh, okay.
And they had, everyone had multiple patients, obviously, but if you were doing like neurophysio, it was you and your neurophysio one-on-one by and large.
Yeah.
So when I got to Aldershot, it was not only a bit of a culture shock in terms of, like, the recovery environment was very different. And, I was sort of in a recovery unit alongside people who were like recovering from sort of, broken toenails, etc.
Yeah.
It was difficult going from an environment where everyone was in the same boat. And you did have that, the thing that the military is very good at like creating, which is that environment where everyone is sort of mutually supporting of each other.
All inclusive almost.
Precisely.
I wanted to ask you, I just wanted to jump in at that point and say, you're obviously getting nervous now. You're coming to the end of that 2 year window. But at any point in the 2 years, and I only ask this because of your age, Jonny, was there ever a moment where you were angry and thought, oh, why me?
Yeah, like massively. And I think as much as one tries to not dwell on that, because so I was in the fortunate position that my clinician, my neurosurgeon, when they found out what had caused my bleed, they had told me this is not a causal thing. Yeah. This is something which just happens, and you were probably born with like the bad blood vessel that did burst, and there were no like, environmental behaviour or whatever factors.
You hadn't done anything.
Yeah, there was nothing that you could do to influence this happening or not. So I was in that fortunate position that I'd been absolved of any like potential guilt around like doing it to myself. And I also knew moving forwards that I could do whatever I wanted and I wouldn't do anything to cause another one. Yeah. Basically. Like the only thing that I've ever been advised against doing is extreme altitude. Okay. Only because you get high altitude cerebral edema, which is a bleed on the brain caused by being at that high altitude. Yeah. and basically it's, having already had one, I sort of don't really fancy another. So kind of fair enough.
Good choice.
Yeah. So you can find lower hills to climb. It's fine. But yeah, so I was lucky in the sense that I had been told by the people that know best, this is not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
But you absolutely do still go through those, those slightly sort of darker moments in terms of, why has this happened to me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I had what I tend to refer to as a difficult summer in 2016. So I had definitely started to become like depressed, probably from sort of the start of that year, I suspect. I was at Aldershot, so I was surrounded by, living in the officer's mess, surrounded by young officers who were basically going off and doing their jobs, which is what I wanted to do, but I couldn't. So I was stuck there on my own, sort of getting myself to the gym like whenever. And, that caused its own problems because I wasn't being monitored. So I was just making it up as I went along.
Okay.
And, so I was sort of working super intensively because I wanted to recover. Then I was getting sick because I was overstretching myself. So I went through quite a long period of basically sort of like smashing myself for 3 weeks, then getting sick for a week and just being in bed.
Yeah.
And then just rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat.
So that probably, it probably long term didn't do me any harm, but it also didn't help like my mental health.
Yeah.
And then I as a result of a lot of this kind of stuff, like the relationship I was in at the time broke down, and absolutely, because I didn't know that I didn't know that stuff was different with me.
Yeah. You don't, I think, when you're in depression. You
totally.
don't. It's not your fault. It's everyone else that's, or it's the environment that you're in.
This was the thing, and I think like because I was largely left to my own devices in rehab and stuff as well, and like the relationship I was in was predominantly long distance, so we weren't seeing each other all the time either. Yeah. I wasn't getting a huge amount of haptics in terms of like people weren't regularly interacting with me like day to day because I wasn't going into the office or whatever it happened to be.
Yeah.
So none of the people that knew me really well were seeing me regularly. So as a result, I think, I sort of wasn't, my really close friends who, would see me occasionally would say, like, I'm not sure if you're all right.
Okay.
And like, I remember chatting to my best mate on the phone at one point, and he, on the back of that phone call, then phoned my neuropsychologist at Headley and said, this guy's not okay.
Oh, okay.
So I was really fortunate that there were people who just knew me well enough to know that I was different. Yeah. But so, I mean, that whole period was quite difficult because it was the end of my neuro recovery period. Yeah. And I was becoming acutely aware that life was not going to go back to normal.
That's tough.
It's just a really difficult one. And I think that obviously I'm now where are we now? 2016. So I'm like 11 and a half years post-bleed now.
Yeah.
And I think in reflection, it's that kind of thing that I think acquiring a disability, acquiring an injury like that is a very difficult thing to go through. And I think, when one looks at, I can't remember exactly what the scale is called, but it's a psychological scale for gauging stress, I think it's actually for gauging. And they've basically listed out a series of traumatic events.
Oh, yeah.
So sort of death of an intimate relative
is top of
it. And then it's, I think it is basically deaths, disability and divorce are the three most traumatic things.
Yeah.
Or three most stressful events that will occur.
God, divorce is that high?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
super high. Because
genuinely.
Well, I think again, and the way that I very much equate acquiring a disability as opposed to being born with one. And, and don't get me wrong, that will have its own issues.
Yeah.
But it is almost as if you've got, the trajectory that you anticipated for yourself as a prior to your injury, and then you've got your trajectory afterwards. Like, it's almost like, and I appreciate this is a slightly overdramatic way of thinking about it, but like, it's almost like part of you dies.
Yeah.
And you are left with the sort of like the ghost of what could have been.
Yeah.
At the same time as having to deal with like figuring life out from a very different perspective.
Yeah. I get that, because I think if you are born with a disability, there's an argument to say that you didn't experience life without that.
Yeah.
Whereas when it happens to you, you have experienced life without that. And as you say, now you have to learn to live through life with it. And you would miss the old you, the old body functioning you. Of course you're going to miss that.
So that's the thing, and it's, as I say, it's sort of not to denigrate anyone else's experience, which is going to be different.
100%.
But I think what acquiring a disability does do, in exactly the same way that any other like really fundamental change does, it forces you to change.
Yeah.
And I think obviously with something like this, forces you to change through a set of circumstances that were not voluntary.
Yeah.
And I think that for all of the pros that being in the military had, one of the cons was that I lost my job. I'd finally sort of felt like I'd sort of found the thing that I wanted to be doing. And so I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't, I was an ultramarathon runner before I joined the army, and I couldn't do that anymore. Like I didn't run for a long time after I got injured.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, it was very much around sort of not only having to figure out, what life looked like moving forwards, but very much having to craft one's identity again to a large extent.
Yeah.
And that was pretty tough.
Yeah. I can't imagine. What I want to know, Jonny, is the physical side of the stroke. Obviously, physiotherapists are brought in and they help you. But what part, especially being an officer, does discipline play in this? Especially when you've had this rubbish summer of 16, where, mental health is now taking a massive nosedive. You're almost at the exit of the 2 years, and you must be slightly panicking, thinking, is this it? Is this it? They've told me 2 years. Where does that discipline fit into all of this? Because you're known for that now. You really are.
Yeah, potentially slightly spuriously. I sort of feel that, fortunately for me, my association with the military has sort of covers over a lot of cracks that people that know me really well. I'm famously late for everything. Like having been late for you today, like I find it basically impossible to keep myself on time. So I suspect that, yeah, anyone who's been forced to wait half an hour for me in a restaurant knows how much discipline I actually lack. But there are certain things where I think when one breaks down discipline into like, okay, so what does that actually mean? And I like doing that.
Yeah.
Because I like to kind of get to the heart of like what makes people tick.
Yeah.
So I'm a psychophysiologist by training. In terms of my academic background is sports science.
Yeah.
And what psychophysiology specifically looks to examine is effectively, why do people, like, when does the human organism like stop doing stuff, and why?
Yeah.
So as an endurance athlete, I find that particularly interesting and relevant.
Yeah.
But I find it also very, very applicable to like everything, basically. Like, why do we not do anything?
Yeah.
And so discipline plays a really interesting role in that process. And I sort of find that, I mean, intrinsically to start with, from my point of view, what a lot of people I suspect would call discipline was actually me just wanting to get back to doing like normal stuff, or what I considered normal stuff. So I wanted to get back to like running ultramarathons because that was my hobby, or at least something similar to that. So I got in touch with like 2 charities when I was sort of going through that process of discharging.
Yeah.
One of which was Martin Hewitt's Adaptive Grand Slam, which is where I eventually sort of reconnected with Jimmy.
Yeah.
And the other was the Armed Forces Para Snow Sports team. So between those two charities and you know, a lot to be said for the mental health impact of that as well, in terms of getting you out of, you know, whatever environment it is that you're wallowing in at that point in time, and just getting you, you know, into the mountains and doing stuff there, and, you know, with a like-minded group of people, a lot of whom are going through very similar stuff.
Yeah.
But it also got me back to the point where I realized that I could do a semblance of the stuff that I really enjoy doing, basically.
Yeah.
And particularly both organizations coming at it from the perspective of you're comparatively like newly injured, and we are here to support you, like figure this out however you need to and however works for you. And that was a really brilliant, you know, sort of, it's probably not over-egging the pudding for me to say like life-saving thing, because ultimately that was the kind of stuff that does give you that little bit of hope that sort of life can go back to at least a semblance of normal, having had that big change.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate to be introduced to both those charities, to go away on trips with them, etc., and get back to doing stuff that I had done previously, basically. And I think the other thing which both organizations did for me was allow me to see other people who had sustained injuries doing like amazing things.
Okay. Yeah.
And as much as I am quite a firm believer that it is not a necessity to see, you know, whether it's people that look like you or sound like you or you know, act like you or whatever it is, I don't believe that you have to have that modeled in order for you to then go and do it.
To be motivated, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as someone, so there's no way to say this without sounding like a bit of a cock, if I'm being completely honest, but like as someone who has done a world first, obviously there wasn't anyone that had done that.
Yeah.
But there were enough people doing similar enough stuff that I could look at what they were doing and say, you know what, actually, not that there is anything special about me to allow me to do this, but if they're doing it, I don't see why I shouldn't as well. So I think having that, you know, having that sort of behavior modeled is a really important thing to someone who is quite new to whether it is disability or, you know, whatever circumstance you find yourself in.
Yeah. Because I think you are learning to rebuild as well as recover, aren't you? You're learning, like we said before, about you're presented now with a different body and a different way of doing things. So now you're rebuilding. And I think it's positive if you're looking at other people that have rebuilt and managed to achieve something. Would you say your involvement with the charities then helped pull you out of that dark place?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think that I think with a lot of these things, and I think particularly mental health in men, and again, this is something which, because I now, you know, albeit with the limited platform I have, but because I now at least I do talk very openly about this stuff, I have sort of no issue engaging with it, because I think it's better to engage with it than
100%,
not.
yeah.
It's amazing the number of people that would not appear to have any reason to have any issue, basically, will come and speak to you and say, there's no one to talk to, or there is no environment or context in which these conversations are able to be had.
Really?
Yeah, I think that, you know, as with a lot of these things, and I don't want to say particularly as a bloke, because I know that there are all sorts of people who will also have trouble talking about things. But I think, you know, there is that context of, you know, machismo or whatever it happens to be that I think is probably actively inhibitive of of being able to turn around and say, actually, I am feeling a bit shit, and actually, I'm not, I'm not only am I not firing on all cylinders, but actually, I might have an issue here, and it may be, something that we need to address, etc.
Do you think maybe because the stigma in doing that would display weakness, and men have to always, at all times, be seen to be strong?
Yeah.
And they don't, by the way, for those that are listening. I'm just saying the stereotype is strength equals male and weakness equals non-male, potentially.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty accurate representation of how it is perceived. But if we were to sort of characterize the environments like quite competitive, quite again, I don't like the terminology because as a vague academic, sort of the alpha male thing's so spurious that it's just nonsense. But I think probably people will take my point when I say they're quite quite alpha environments and all of this sort of thing. And as much as I've sort of never really bought into the requirement to be like, the biggest swinging dick in the room or anything like that, it's just basically all nonsense.
Yeah.
But I think there are so many factors that prohibit people, even if it's the social factors of not wanting to display weakness, the commercial factor of, if I do display weakness, am I going to get overlooked for promotion?
Okay.
Because there is a stigma around it.
Interesting.
And, I think that for all that, people are very prepared these days to say, oh no, we want to maintain your mental health, we want to make sure you're okay. Like, there is also definitely an element of, doing that for display purposes only.
Yeah.
And I think there is still that intrinsic and very understandable worry about, oh, okay, I get that people don't want me, topping myself in my spare time or whatever, but actually, if I do go and ask for help, is that still, tacitly going to be taken against me or anything like that?
Are you then still reliable?
Precisely. So I sort of find myself in the fortunate position these days that, because of my background and because of the stuff I've done, etc., and also because a lot of it was quite a long time ago, I think, time does have a way of sort of cushioning that stuff. I'm pretty happy standing up in whatever environment I find myself in.
Yeah.
And not having to care about, whether I'm the hardest bloke in the room or whatever, because it doesn't bother me because I've done, a lot of the stuff I've set out to do, I have done. But I've also done some pretty, what is perceived to be quite extreme stuff. And so there's that element of really not caring.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in the fortunate position that I really don't care.
Yeah.
So I think that the nice thing about being in that position from my point of view is not that, it's not that I don't still have like mental health like wobbles, because I absolutely do. But it's that I don't have any requirement at all to hold up any facade around it.
Yeah. Which is super healthy, isn't it? When you break it down.
Yeah.
Super
absolutely.
healthy.
Well, I mean, the equivalency I always make with mental health is to physical health, because when you examine the mechanisms that they're affecting, it's the same process. And, the way I view it is you maintain your physical health, or you go to the gym in order to avoid seeing your doctor, basically, like at a pretty, for the purposes of the analogy.
Yeah.
And what you absolutely wouldn't do is like wake up one morning, break your leg, and still go to work. You'd phone your boss and be like, I'm really sorry, I've like tripped over the pavement or whatever this morning, I've broken my leg, I'm going to hospital to get it plastered or whatever. People will like persist in doing whatever it is they're doing when they in themselves feel awful. And there is no equivalent mechanism of saying, like, I'm feeling terrible, I need to, go and see a therapist, have a day off, whatever, because they are not treated equally. Like, physical and mental health are not treated equally currently. And I think that the thing from my perspective as as someone who ultimately cares about like performance is that if I work in a bank, like actually I can turn up to work with a broken leg because I'm just going to sit in a chair and trade or, whatever I happen to do.
Yeah.
What I don't want is anything going on at all that's going to affect my cognitive performance. So like why in those environments are people fundamentally not looking after the one thing that will facilitate them being better at their jobs?
Absolutely.
So there's something really counterintuitive going on when you actually break it down.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think, as I say, it's also, there are so many really complex like socio-cultural factors at play there as well, that from my perspective, I think in order to change it, we do need to really have a very support at a very institutional level in order not only to sort of demonstrate that this sort of stuff's okay, but to truly normalize it.
Yeah.
And people also need help in order to show them how to look after their mental health.
Yeah.
You can go out into the street these days and say to almost anyone, do you think mental health's important? And they'll say yes, because they've been told that it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you go out into the street and say, okay, so you think mental health's important, how do you look after it?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That, from my point of view, that's what needs to change.
It's so true, because I think you can't quantify mental health. If you have a physical ailment, you can judge by temperature, you start losing weight, you don't feel great, you ache all over. There is something there that you can almost put a label on. But actually, mental health could be, am I just a bit tired today? Or is this something deeper? You know what? I'll worry about it tomorrow. Because it's a harder fix, isn't it? Mentally, if you don't feel great, you're probably not going to go for a run.
Yeah, so I think, the interesting thing is a lot of this stuff does exist in terms of there are certainly mechanisms which enable you to gauge your mental health or enable people to gauge your mental health, but it exists at the minute very much in the clinical domain.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things which we're looking at trying to change at the minute, is bringing this, how do we drag something which is very much seen as, a big part of the stigma is if you go and see a clinician, that's quite a big thing.
Yeah.
Why do people not go to the doctor? Well, because you have to admit then there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm terrible for doing that. If I have had a sore back for 6 weeks, but because I'm a prat, have been oh no, it's absolutely fine, it will heal up on its own, just stretch out every now and again.
Yeah.
It's dude, you're a professional athlete, go and see a physio.
Get it checked out.
Yeah. I literally saw a physio last week, and he was just why haven't you done this earlier?
Yeah.
It's because I'm an idiot. But it's actually because I don't want to admit there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that I think rather than encouraging more people to seek a clinical pathway, because also a lot of people don't need a clinical pathway straight away. Actually what we need to do is we need to drag the understanding, the knowledge and the information out of the clinical domain into the public domain. If you, and again, I'll use the equivalency because I think it works really well. If you go to a gym for the first time, you go and see a personal trainer, they will show you how to lift weights.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to see them every time you go to the gym. They'll tell you what to do. They'll give you a program. Eventually you'll get to the point where you are perfectly happy, maintaining physical health on your own.
Yeah.
Go for a run 3 days a week or whatever it happens to be. People are more than capable of keeping themselves healthy on their own. What they need to do in the first instance, however, is to understand that keeping themselves healthy is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think you look at the manner in which the perception of physical health has evolved over the last 40 years.
Hugely.
When I was growing up, my parents would never work out.
No, mine didn't either.
No, it wasn't for that
it
generation.
Was difficult to find a gym, I'll be
It was
honest.
difficult to find a gym. And also I think that, it was very much seen as sport. It was a recreational thing. It was an entertainment thing. It wasn't, I think that no one had or very few people had tangentially drawn that line between this is fun and it keeps you healthy.
Yeah.
Like the health thing wasn't there.
Yeah.
You go to the gym now that like they're full. Like everyone's doing it. People are like, I mean, you can't move for tripping over like recreational runners these days.
Yeah.
And good. Like that's a good thing. Mental health is like where it was 40 years ago.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Jonny, how do you think that we could get to that point where physical has moved forward 40 years, but mental hasn't?
So I will shamelessly plug my next venture on this one.
Yes.
But I think in more general terms, what I see a lot of now, which it's not as bad of a thing as I think it is, but it also annoys me a bit, is that every Z-list celebrity out there will be talking about their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not doing it. I don't think they're necessarily doing it with like actual malice, but they're also not doing it with genuine concern.
Mm.
They're doing it to promote their platform because it's very much the front of the zeitgeist right now. As potentially it's just me being sulky or me being ex-military and therefore wanting to do rather than talk.
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is we need to move past the rhetoric to it. We're at a juncture socially where we're really good at talking about stuff because of social media and stuff. So we promote these conversations. The reality to it is what that is antithetical to is action. From my perspective, what I think people need to have role modeled to them are good behaviours around mental health, rather than slightly circular conversations around it. Mm-hmm. And I also think that making resources available to people, very, very simply making resources available to people is really important. So, the next sort of big project that I'm working on, we're looking at engaging with the US military around this. And specifically, we are using a physical challenge, frankly, in order to bring attention to not the mental health problem in and of itself.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're going around and hopefully going to be engaging with people to show them not the solution, but to show them, again, it's the equivalency of how do you lift weights for mental health.
Yeah.
So we want to do that. And the reason we're looking at engaging with the US military around it is because they are, when you look at Western society as a whole, they are the single worst affected group of people by suicide.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I won't go into all the detail now because the military civilian thing in terms of suicide, some of it's quite obvious as to why military suicide rates are higher.
Yeah.
There is again a level of complexity there which needs to be dealt with institutionally by the military. But in big handfuls, in very general terms, militaries have higher suicide rates than civilian populace. Mm-hmm. The US civilian populace has a significantly higher suicide rate than that of the UK. And so the US military's suicide rate is like off the chart, is catastrophically high. I think it's something like 44 people a day or something like that.
Goodness
it's really bad. I believe I'm right in saying that between active serving personnel and veterans, I think, again, the surveys are quite vague and not all of them are 100% current.
Yeah.
But I believe I'm right in saying that the latest numbers were 44 people a day.
Goodness me.
They're catastrophically high. And the reason from my point of view as to why to engage with the US military is the manner in which US society holds their military in such high esteem. We don't have the same thing in the UK.
Okay.
And don't get me wrong, there's not a level of like active disrespect in the UK.
No.
But the US military are really put on a pedestal by their civilian populace.
Yeah.
And for me, when you look at the demographic of society who are worst affected by mental health, it's teenage to 40-year-old men primarily. And, who is representing that group in society? Well, fighting age males is one of them. Mm. So if we can go over and work with the worst affected segment of one of the worst affected societies in the Western world, as a socio and cultural leader of the Western world, if we can start to create an element of that trickle-down effect, if we can role model or if we can get US soldiers role modeling to their civilian contemporaries who hold them in such high esteem anyway, that this is not about being like the hardest bloke in the room, or it's not about being invulnerable. My hope is that we can create that trickle down effect that will propagate wider.
Yeah.
So that's
Makes
kind
sense.
of the premise that
Yeah.
we're operating on. But I mean, that's
so good.
it's the best idea that I've had in terms of how we propagate that so far. I mean, whether it'll work or not is another question.
Another
but
question.
We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk in 40 years.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You know, the one thing that made me a little bit sad was your comment there about the fact that the military in the US are put on that pedestal, but you guys don't feel that you get that same from the UK. It's mad, that, isn't it? Because we're seeing it all the time on the news. Not so much now, but, you know, in my lifetime, there has always been wars going on and, you know, the UK has gone out and you're very proud of military. Not far from Royal Wharton Bassett,
Yeah.
where, you know, all of the deceased would come back and the streets would be lined and
Yeah.
I would oftentimes join that. So it surprises me that there isn't that same recognition here.
I think it's partly because the US have a very again quite a nuanced relationship, I think, with their entire constitution. Their
Yeah.
entire nation is built on the concept of freedom. Ironically, given what's going over there at the minute, I won't get into that because I won't be allowed in the fucking country when I go out there next year otherwise. But you know, their entire constitution is built around the notion of freedom. Literally that word, freedom to, you know, the first 5 amendments or however many amendments to
Yeah.
it in the constitution are all freedom to. I think their military are very much the vanguard of that in their perception. Like the whole raison d'etre for their military is to uphold freedom.
Yeah.
Like we don't have that. We don't have, which I think is a shame about British society in a lot of ways. Like we don't have, for all that it creates problems over in the US that are of a different flavour. Like, you know, we don't have that single unifying thing in our society that, regardless of like who you are, that you can get behind. You know, when you look at left and right in the US, they are unified by the fact that both of them, for all of the manner in which they'll go about it differently and talk about it differently, they want freedom of something for someone.
Yeah.
You know,
Makes sense.
whether that is trans rights or freedom to bear arms, they want a freedom of some sort. That's the single like linguistic unifying factor of that country. Like we don't have that, and as a result, there's nothing unifying within society for the military to relate to. And I think that, and don't get me wrong, I've never experienced anything other than like respect in uniform.
Yeah.
And you know, you look at, I mean, very different thing, but I volunteer with the cadet force now locally, and
Okay.
you look at the turnout on Remembrance Day.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Like
Yeah.
it's a great thing, and it's absolutely, I think, perceived as part of the country's legacy. But it's not. I think, you know, the perception of the military in the UK has sort of gone from, you know, post Falklands, blokes are, you know, knocking around in barrack towns, not really doing much,
Yeah.
starting fights and getting drunk and causing trouble, etc.
Yeah.
You then fast forward to sort of early 2000s, like Afghan, Iraq, very, you know, very much public perception at that point, really super positive.
Yeah.
You know, like at that point, very, you know, very much more similar to the US.
Yeah.
Now we're just not in the public conscious as much.
Yeah.
And as a
Yeah.
result, people don't care.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I get it. Like people have got more than enough going on in their daily lives to worry about that, you know, worrying about the squaddy down the road or whatever is not a big thing. But there is a really noticeable change when you go to the US. They don't even care if you're an American soldier or not.
Really?
So my
Interesting.
ex, when I was going through rehab, lived in California.
Mm-hmm.
So she was working in Newport Beach. I couldn't pay for stuff when I was out there. And it wasn't as if I was in uniform. I was just a fighting age male who walked around with a massive limp. And so people would say, "Oh, are you military?" And like, well, yeah, but not, yeah, but British.
Yeah,
and you know, and only just.
Yeah.
And, you know, like genuinely, Jen and I would go out. Someone else has picked up your check, sir, for dinner.
Goodness me.
Like the bloke who owned the gym that I went to when I was out there, he was like, "Oh, my son's Air Force. Like, oh no, you come here for free."
Look
It was
at that.
remarkable. Like, it's totally different.
Yeah.
It's really embedded into their cultural fibre
Now
in
I
a
get
manner
why
that it's
Jimmy
not
wants
here.
to stay out in the US.
Oh yeah, like exactly.
He's got a right meal ticket out
drink
there.
for free, easy, yeah.
So, leads me nicely then into the poll. Tell me, how did the idea even spark?
Yeah, so this was again both Jimmy and myself have a lot to either thank or blame Martin Hewitt for. So the guy who runs the Adaptive Grand Slam charity, Martin,
Yeah.
lovely bloke, despite the fact I'd never admit that to his face. And he and I were discussing the poll. He went down there in 2021, I think, as part of his project to become the first ever person to do the Explorers Grand Slam.
Okay.
Which is North and South Poles and the 7 Summits.
Right.
Which he finished just before Christmas, actually, which was amazing. Like, really incredible 14-year project.
Goodness
that
me.
he ran. Like, really amazing thing. He and I had chatted about Antarctica because, as mentioned previously, I can't do like extreme altitude.
Yeah.
So doing stuff like Everest was kind of out of the question for me. But I was like, having got into cross-country skiing as well and being, nothing better than bang average at it, but I can do it, This thing of Antarctica kind of intrigued me because it was this culmination of lots of stuff that I'd done in separate handfuls.
Yeah.
Sort of, long ultramarathon stuff, cross-country skiing, the expeditionary piece of being out for, days at a time, self-reliant, etc. And I'd sort of discussed it with Martin, and he was like, yeah, it's really hard down there. I sort of like, okay, that makes me a bit anxious because, like, I'm not, if Martin's saying it's really hard, he was like X1 para officer, like properly hard bloke. I was like, if he says that's really hard, it probably is really difficult. So again, you get that level of imposter syndrome of like, I'm not sure if that's quite for me then. But then the more I looked at it in terms of, because I'm very much a fan of looking at stuff in terms of, let's find a reason why I shouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. Rather than assuming it's not feasible, let's find a reason, like very, very hard and fast reason why I shouldn't do it. Like if something comes along where it's like riding a bike, I can't ride a bike. I simply don't have the control in my leg to actually do it. Yeah. So for me, that's like, right, I'm not going to do that.
Can't do that.
Can't do that. Can't be bothered. Sure that if I cared enough, I could figure it out, but I don't, so fine. But with this project, I was really, really intrigued by it. So I was like, let's just start exploring the concept. And looked at it in terms of, if I go down there as a group, I'm going to be doing largely the same stuff that I would be on my own. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's any individual aspect of it that, like, I as an individual can't do. I don't think there's that single sort of game-breaking thing of, can you put a tent up, or whatever. Yeah. I don't think there's anything there that I can't do. So is there any reason, therefore, why I couldn't do it on my own? So we went through these mental exercises for a long time. And just got to the point where it was like, I don't see any reason why this isn't possible. And during that period, I'd started sort of engaging with other people who had done solos before, and so really understood the landscape. Didn't understand the injury to the same extent. But again, you sort of talk it through with people and they're like, well, I don't kind of see why that's not achievable. And it kind of grew legs from there, really. And I, as I tend to do with some of this stuff, like I got really obsessed by it. Like to the point where basically all I did for 6 years was
really?
Work towards this thing.
Yeah. I was going to ask you how long you've mentally and physically prepared. So it was 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years. Long 6 years. As I say, sort of very fortunate to have been mentored, advised, etc., by people that had run, very similar projects to this before. And I was, a guy called Ben Saunders, who is I don't want to be disrespectful of him. He's the generation before me in terms of sort of polar exploration. But like, I mean, was doing this stuff for like 20 years. Super incredible dude. Like,
Yeah.
has done way more than I will ever achieve in those regions. But I mean, he said to me back in 2020, at the point at which you get to Antarctica, it is just a long, cold walk at that stage. All of the fundraising around it, the training, the learning, acquiring the skills, etc. That's the hard part of running a project like that. And I mean, you will be well aware of this because you run your own business.
Mm-hmm.
Getting anything like that off the ground in the first place is so tough. At the point at which you have a bit of momentum behind you, it doesn't necessarily get any easier because there's always, new challenges and new, periods of growth or whatever. But yeah, sort of getting those initial like sponsors on board and stuff like that was tough.
Yeah. I think I saw your video when you got there. What's that moment like?
Yeah, so that was
It
an
looked
interesting
emotional.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because I had, funnily enough, I had wondered like what it was going to be like. You kind of anticipate getting to the finish line and wondering how you're going to respond. And I've done, long stuff before, albeit not quite to the same scale. Like I ran the Coast Path in 2022, the Southwest Coast Path, which is a long, that was 27 days. That was a long trip.
That's long.
And I kind of expected to like feel something when I got to the end of it. And like I got to the end of it, sort of basically a signpost near Poole, and sort of and was like, oh, like cool, right? Well, that's that then. And like I literally had no emotional response to it at all.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to get to the South Pole and it'll be this massive anticlimax as well. And it wasn't. It was like 100% sort of catharsis basically upon getting there. And I mean, I was in quite a lot of pain at that point. Like my right leg had started getting quite inflamed. So I had some pretty bad like onset Achilles tendonitis in my right leg, which had come about. I mean, we kind of knew it was going to happen. It was, the right leg was doing so much more work than the left, for all the obvious reasons. We kind of anticipated something was going to happen at some stage. What I hadn't anticipated was that I was going to be on, pretty strong painkillers basically for 30 days. And actually the biggest issue wasn't at all the fact that it was uncomfortable. It was the fact that there was the anxiety in your head. All that time spent alone with no one to, it wasn't that I didn't have anyone to talk to because I could communicate with them via the phone and all of this, but there was, it was that element of just uncertainty, and so I probably spent most of the last 2 weeks of that trip when I wasn't hallucinating about food, wondering what I was going to do if my Achilles tendon snapped, and do I have the stuff in my sled that I need to like MacGyver something together where I can literally, make it over the finish line with, just duct taped together or something, and how far from the pole will I need to be before it becomes just undoable. And so, and unlike any other project I've ever done before, I'd had the conversation with my expedition manager prior to going down there of basically, whilst I don't intend to do myself any long-term harm doing this, like, it's important that we have had the discussion so that we both know that I'm not coming off the ice unless I physically cannot move. So it's sort of having mentally prepared for that and then having to deal with just the uncertainty and the anxiety of that last few weeks of, of really being unsure whether I was going to make it or not.
Yeah. Do you think that was the silence? Because you mentioned there about obviously you have got someone to talk to, but typically you don't. How does that silence piece play into keeping mentally strong?
Yeah, so I mean, I had music that I was listening to, but I tried to use it sparingly because then, I basically used to play in the afternoon. So
Okay.
the sort of last sort of 6 kilometers of the day, which is, was by that point was sort of, normally 6 kilometers, about 2 or 3 hours worth of skiing.
Yeah.
Sort of you use the music to get you to the finish line of the day, basically.
Okay.
So the rest of the time, as you say, you are unstimulated. And what I find with that is that it means that your brain will, unless you are consciously thinking about something, your brain will just think about whatever it wants to. And yeah, the problem I had very distinctly during that period was that my brain was only concerned with two things. And it was basically how much my leg hurt and the fact I was really hungry. So you sort of, not, I mean, wandering around thinking about, and what I used to do during those periods was whenever I was thinking about my leg too much, I used to consciously force myself to think about food.
Okay.
Because it was kind of the
Yeah.
next most readily accessible thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a bit of a head game going on towards the end, certainly in terms of like, how do you keep yourself? Unfortunately, even if you don't keep yourself mentally focused, there's still nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Like you can't, physically, you're still
You're in
having
it.
to just move one foot at a time.
Absolutely.
But as I think, as with most things in life, like, these things are a bit easier if you're a bit happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was sort of there was lots of how do I keep myself on task mentally,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I address not deteriorating in terms of emotionally deteriorating in order to enable myself to like operate really effectively every day.
Yeah.
And that sort of secondary point was really important, and ultimately was a combination of like being really well supported by like my friends and family, and being able to like speak to them on the satellite phone. And if you're having a really shit day, just phone, basically just phone as you would anywhere else in the world. You just phone them up and whinge at them.
Yeah.
And like eating chocolate in the evenings was basically the other sort of remedy for it. So by no means foolproof, but it worked to an extent. Yeah.
Was there ever a point, Johnny, where you thought you wouldn't do it? Was there ever a moment, whether it be, in the first thing in the morning, last thing at night, where you thought, maybe not?
So not to the extent that it was ever more than like a passing thought.
Okay. And what brought that on? Was there anything in particular that you remember?
It was normally just pain, to be honest. It was normally just one of those ones that it was like, you're sort of hurting a lot and you just think, is this going to turn into an injury that becomes unmanageable?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing for me around that side of things, and I think because that's the thing that people want to understand is the resilience angle to it. And actually, the thing from my perspective, which I find interesting, and this is often asked to me within the context of, I don't think young people are very resilient these days, or this kind of stuff, which, for the record, has been said of every generation by the generation before them from time immemorial. But I think that the real resilience from my perspective was not during the expedition. It was in the 6 years before the expedition.
Okay, that's interesting.
And there is the neat analogy that we use in the military of hot and cold courage. And the hot courage is the kind of, if someone is shooting at you, having the courage to shoot back, basically.
Okay.
It's quite a binary decision in the heat of the moment in terms of, well, yes, because the other option is to just wait until they actually shoot you.
Yeah.
The cold courage side of it was much more a case of, are you capable of operating when things are not like adrenaline charged and sort of hot? Are you capable of still doing something, whether that requires bravery, in a very calm setting? And everyone has encountered this kind of thing of, are you capable of like doing the right thing even if it's the difficult thing?
Yeah.
The 6 years build up to the exped, like when no one knew that I was doing it, when before I told anyone about it, even during that period of fundraising, all of that, like that's the period where the real self-doubt exists. And that's the period also where if if you stopped doing it, if I'd just gone and got a normal job and cracked on,
Yeah.
like life would continue.
Mm-hmm.
And no one actually would be any different. And certainly no one would be aware of any difference.
Yeah.
Like for me, that's that sort of like cold resilience almost that's kind of almost the bit that I'm more proud of, really, in a way, of, all of that. Like the fundraising side of things was desperately hard. Like it
Really?
really was, and friends of mine that have done stuff like this will also say the same thing. Like it is the perennial struggle for all of us. And I was incredibly fortunate to find sponsors who got it and were, willing and able to front the money, etc. But, you're dealing with rejection after rejection in a lot of instances, mine as well. For a lot of that period, you're working another job on top of it. So just to keep the lights on at home and all of this. And as I say, the thing with it is that at that point, like, if you were to quit then, it doesn't matter. Like, it is completely consequence free. If you pick the phone up and quit on Antarctica, someone's got to send a plane to land in the middle of nowhere to come and get you.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't think I've sort of, I think it would be a braver man than me that would have the courage to actually make that phone call, to actually
Really?
admit that they didn't have it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, for me, it's the ability to keep going when it doesn't matter. That I think is almost more important than the ability to keep going when it really does.
That's so interesting. For those that are listening, Jonny, what would you say, or maybe you don't, I'm sure you do, have mental tools to cope with the situations where you're feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I probably ought not to admit that it's probably more luck than judgment with me. But no, I mean,
I doubt that very much, considering what you've done.
I mean, I think at a very basic level, it is if you are confident and I think it is that confidence of genuinely knowing rather than that false bravado of, I think I've probably got this. If you genuinely know that you've put the hard work in to deserve to be where you are, there is then that part of you that can more comfortably, I think, say, and now we'll find out whether that was enough.
Yeah.
Like that, I think I'm a pretty simple creature at the end of the day. And like for me, all of the big expeditions that I've done, I've always approached them in terms of there isn't a formula for doing these sorts of things. And I mainly do my own physical training programs myself. Like I've got like Jess, my PT, is amazing. She's a strength and conditioning coach. She's incredible. But in terms of the whole training program, I normally do it mainly myself, and then Jess will input on that side of things. We are at best using professional judgment to guess how much we need to do before one of these big events. Mm-hmm. You can't like replicate 46 days on the ice.
Yeah.
Certainly not immediately beforehand.
Yeah.
So you are basically making educated guesses. So in the build up to all of this stuff, you toe the start line hoping that you've done enough up to that point, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think for me, that's my ethic has always been, if you put in the hard work, and you honestly have put in the hard work, which comes back to me saying that, like, you've done it.
Yeah.
I think at that point you probably have as good a chance as anyone of succeeding.
But I think my point is that your mindset is such, because it was interesting when you were telling me about your decision to do the South Pole or not, you were almost talking or finding reasons why you should do it as opposed to why you shouldn't. Like I would sit there and go, well, I can't do it because of this, and this. That's it. It's off the table. Whereas you were sort of challenging each of those doubts, objections, reasons. You were challenging each one. And that has to come down to a mindset position, I think.
Yeah, I
Which
mean,
kind of ties in with the whole healthy mental attitude, doesn't it?
so this is the thing. And I mean, I think I'm pretty optimistic by default. Like, I think my default
Yeah.
setting is to generally be fairly sort of chirpy, despite the fact my face doesn't always show it. But yeah, I kind of, certainly in terms of what I have seen, I think that, put it this way, I think it's the easiest thing in the world to think of a million reasons as to why you shouldn't do something.
Mhm.
Um, that is not the same as a million reasons why you can't do something.
I agree.
And I mean, I say that actually from a position of completely like zero judgment, because ultimately, from my point of view, sort of having studied it as much as having done it, being motivated to do something is as important as sort of anything else. Like, I certainly wouldn't, I am myself like very, very bad at doing stuff that I don't really care about and I'm not particularly motivated to do.
Yeah.
And I think that when we look at the model of like, why does stuff happen? Well, people have to want to do it in order for it to happen. And I think that that's often the piece that's sort of left out. How do we deal with stuff when it's overwhelming? Well, we incentivize people more to do it.
Yeah.
Like, the juice has got to be worth the squeeze in a lot of these instances. And yeah, I kind of think that where we see, certainly I see examples from the corporate world, in my perception, getting it slightly wrong currently is, lots of their graduates are sort of saying, oh, I feel a bit overwhelmed, or I'm not sure that I want to be doing this, or the response is, oh, young people lack resilience. No, they don't. They're not appropriately incentivized.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, from my own point of view, we can really seek to change the conditions to a certain extent. And actually, for me, a lot of this is about facilitating people doing stuff that they would not necessarily consider themselves able to do under any other circumstances. For me, this is about facilitation.
Yeah.
And rather than, again, it's flipping the question on its head. Like, rather than looking at people and saying, oh, they can't do that or they won't do that. Okay, so what do we need to do in order to make it so they can and they will? And I think that's that big thing.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was simply a case of, well, do I want to do this? Yes, I think this is on a personal level, quite a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's something that I can
hugely
definitely,
cool.
well, it's something I can definitely like get my teeth into. And
Definitely.
as I'm no doubt sort of picked up, like, it's not only is it a physical challenge, but it's quite an intellectual challenge as well.
Absolutely.
Like, you've got to get it all right.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing excites me.
Yeah.
So it's, how do you are therefore back to very simple questions around what technical skills do you need in order to succeed? Like, what is your motivation strong enough to actually get you to the finish line? I.e., what is your incentive structure here? And then, are you being advised properly? Do you have all the stuff in place to actually enable you to like afford it and pay for it and, not have life fall apart around the seams? So I think, I suppose this is, again, going back to exactly what we were saying before we started filming around, like, me being called ferociously tedious by a friend of mine. Like, this is why I don't have a girlfriend, is because I can basically take something which is intrinsically quite exciting and quite interesting and distill it into, like, very tedious, like, banal factors. But it is why I don't really see any difference between me doing the South Pole and any other thing that any other person does. Mine's a very extreme example of it, but the mechanism that's facilitated me doing it is exactly the same as any other person going and doing their job normally.
I think possibly because you've done it and you speak from a position of authority, but I have to disagree with you. I think that the mental discipline that must have taken, and the fact, not just the physical. God, it's cold out there. Is what I would say.
It is quite chilly, to be fair.
And as you say, the hunger, pulling your own sled. My goodness me, that must have been so hard. But you did it, you know, that resilience that you displayed there is phenomenal, Jonny, absolutely phenomenal. Um, would you say, just my final question on resilience, because I know that you're really big on that, would you ever say that resilience could be toxic?
I think that my definition, or the way that I look at resilience, can be misconstrued.
Okay.
I think that, so when one looks at like the dictionary definition of resilience, it's very basic. It's like the ability to do hard stuff. And I think that that is often misconstrued as just being like rigid in the face of adversity.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about Antarctica, simply physically as an environment, as a place, is that as soon as you start operating in like extreme cold environments and stuff like that, you immediately realize, or you immediately realize, or stuff starts falling off you, that it's stronger than you are.
Yeah.
And so being inflexible about your approach, kind of, trying to bulldoze through it, is not how you succeed.
Yeah.
So, and so, as someone who is not religious but grew up in a relatively like religious context,
Mm-hmm.
there's, I think, some parable about the oak tree and the pine tree, and one of them was rigid and stood upright, and the other bent in the wind. And
Yeah. Yeah.
These days I actually liken it much more to the sort of James Joyce line from Ulysses, like,
Which is
bowed but unbroken.
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there is a lot to be said in terms of, in my opinion, what real resilience looks like. In the same way as mental health, physical health, all of these things, it's not about being like rigid in the face of adversity. It's about being intelligent and agile and adaptable enough to react and respond appropriately to everything that life throws at you,
Yeah.
while still being able to work towards the desired outcome.
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
I just think it's that thing which, for me, one sees so many examples of people who think they are being tough,
Yeah.
and actually they're just so much of it is for display purposes,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
for ego.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, yeah, there's a brilliant line from a TV show that I used to watch when I was at university called The OC, which I'm sure is pretty obscure, but like, is one of the main characters sort of said, yeah, like, loud does not equal funny. And I think you can interchange funny for tough, or
Yeah.
big, or important, or any popular word there. Like, I think just because someone is sort of loud about how good they are, doesn't mean it's true. And I sort of find myself typically gravitating towards people who are like your brother,
Yeah.
like the classic quiet professional.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't need to tell people that I'm good at what I do, because I get on with it and I just do it.
Yeah. There's no need, I think, for validation.
Yeah, exactly.
The self-validation is already there. And when you have the self-validation, you don't really care then what anyone else thinks, or if they judge you, or whatever.
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, as you were saying, like, for me, that side of it, in terms of, is there sort of toxic resilience? Well, only in terms of, I would consider it to be like quite spurious if it was taking that form.
Yeah. Jonny, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Anything that you want to leave the viewers with?
Yeah, I think, whilst I would not encourage people to be like me in 99% of their lives, what I would encourage them to do is, like, have more self-belief. Like, view things in terms of, why shouldn't I do this, rather than thinking of reasons why you should.